Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to IMAGI-NATION TV. I'm your host, Asterix, and today we have a very special guest joining us, Damon Gameau. And we're very excited to hear about his work and what's been happening, and we've partnered with Grounded Festival for the Cancelled Not Cancelled keynote segment. Today, we reflect on hope, as we have been doing all week. I think about hope often, and I think about the challenges we face as we look at adversity. UNESCO updated that the number of children affected now by COVID-19 and they're having their education affected is 1.37 billion people. Now that's the latest stat from last week. It's probably gone up. To put that number into context, that's 55 Australias, 55 populations of Australia around the world suddenly having children at home who don't have direct access to a teacher in their life and are working out how to navigate this new world. Now, my plea is to the people who are overseeing education systems, please let the reins off. Please free us. Let us go direct. Let us work out how we can be innovative in this time. This is not a time for bureaucracy. This is not a time for risks. It's not a time to move slowly. 1.37 billion people we will not get to if we spend 3 months planning and working out how to do this. We have to respond and respond quickly. This is a time for fast solutions, and that's when hope can sing. When we trust each other and expect the best, we experiment, and then we will innovate in ways we've never thought about. We will find solutions and ways to educate we could never have imagined if we are brave. Please, educators, please, education ministers, please, leaders, be brave. Embrace this moment. There is no failure. Let us go together on it. Today, we meet Damon. Damon, how are you, fella?
Hello, Asterix. Thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure to see you. Tell us a little bit about your work.
Well, look, I probably consider myself a filmmaker. I've made 2 films in my life, sort of feature films, a couple of short animation films that were pretty bad, but I learned a lot from. And the first film I made was called That Sugar Film, which was about sugar's impact on our body. And I did a really silly experiment of eating about 40 teaspoons of sugar a day. And then I tested what it did to my body, which wasn't fun. And then I've recently made a film called 2040, which shows what the world could look like in 2040 if we put into practice some of the solutions that are available right now around our environment.
Oh, well, we've got some people on the chat line who are so excited to hear you. We've got Jenny Andrews from the Blue Mountains west of Sydney. We've got Bobby Cunningham saying, Todd Smith, hello from Warrnambool, Australia. We've got Robert Bonney, hello from Hobart, Australia. Hello, Robert. Coriander Goldbatch, hi from Sydney, Australia. We've got Milk, hello Milk Revolution, that's a long name. Hi from the Central Coast. Keep your chats coming and keep your questions coming along the way. We're going to catch up for a Q&A with Damon afterwards. Damon, please, the floor is yours. Welcome to Cancelled Not Cancelled, and we are so excited to have you keynoting today. Go with hope and have a great time, my friend.
Thank you, Asterix, and thanks for having me. And welcome, everyone, to what is a pretty extraordinary time right now for everyone around the planet. I think that the analogy that works for me is that it's like a caterpillar when it goes into the chrysalis, into its cocoon. Before it turns into the butterfly, it goes into this sort of amorphous soup-like shape with no real structures, and no one really knows what happens at that time. And I think we're sort of in that state right now. Everything's a bit flux, it's a bit unknown, and we've got an opportunity to do things very differently when we emerge from our own little cocoons that we're all in at the moment. So this is the time for hope. This is the time for imagination and dreaming and pushing forth ideas that might have seemed radical only a month ago. Now they can actually be we can have a serious conversation about them. And that's really what I want to talk to you about. That's kind of what I've been doing for the last 4 years, is looking for those hopeful solutions that could actually fundamentally change the way we interact with each other and all of our living systems. So for me, it was about 5 years ago. I was in the middle of reading a newspaper article about coral bleaching. And I found myself halfway through the article, just stopped reading it, and I turned the page of the newspaper and started reading something else. And then I caught myself and I thought, I care about this issue. I'm a father. I've got 2 young daughters. Why didn't I finish reading that story? What was it that just made me disengage with it? Was it too overwhelming? Did I feel like I couldn't do anything about it? So I wanted to find out. And I reached out to a few different people. And the first person I spoke to was an environmental psychologist in America. And she explained to me that as humans, we have something that's called a window of tolerance, which means there's only so much negative information that we can hear and comprehend before we completely shut down and disengage. And if you think about the stories we hear right now, the narratives are very negative. I'm sure a lot of you at school, you're hearing about how much plastic's in the ocean. You're hearing about all the animals that are going extinct. We hear about climate change all the time. There's only so much we can deal with before we shut down and disengage. And that's exactly what was happening to me. So I wanted to find a different way to try and engage people, because if I couldn't get engaged on this topic, and I'm someone that cares about it, what hope do we have of getting people that aren't as interested in these type of topics to come on board, to learn about it and to take action? And I found this pretty incredible quote by an author and a critic named Raymond Williams. And he said that to be truly radical is to make hope possible rather than despair convincing. And what he meant by that was, we've got to excite people. We've got to get them, move them forward with excitement rather than constantly banging them over the head and showing them how bad things are. So this quote really set off a chain of events for me. And I started doing some real research into the meaning of hope and to how it can be a motivator for us as human beings. And the key things I learned is that, number one, hope is often not found in the mainstream. So the nightly news you look at, the sort of the news we watch at 6 o'clock, very rarely do they share stories of hope. That a lot of these organisations, and the same on social media, they understand that we are more inclined to watch a story and click and share it if it has a fear element to it. If it's something emotive that gets us in and it stirs our soul, then we're more likely to share it. And especially on these social media platforms like the Twitters and Facebook, their whole business model is based on getting people to like and click and give away the information, because they use that information to then sell to advertisers, and that's how they make their billions and billions of dollars. So they want stories that are evocative and emotional that we'll click on. So that's one element. The hope is lurking in the shadows. It's not in the main spotlight. All great things that people are doing, you often won't find on the nightly news, which is unfortunate, and I hope we turn that as we move forward. The second thing about hope is that we need it as human beings. It's really an important thing. It's what gets us up every day in the morning, the idea of a better future or a better outcome. And this couldn't be explained more clearly than a book I read about some prisoners in a concentration camp in World War II. And anytime these prisoners thought they were going to get released, if they were told, you know what, you're going to get out on Christmas Day, their whole spirit would change. They would start cleaning themselves up and trying to wash and get fit and stop smoking, because they thought there's something to look forward here. They had hope. But the minute they found out that wasn't going to happen, that they weren't going to get released, all their spirit diminished again, and they took up their vices again, and they let themselves go because they'd lost that hope. And this is really important. We need this as a motivator. You might be familiar with Martin Luther King, who was a big human rights activist, and he said his famous speech is, "I have a dream." Now, if he'd said, "I have a nightmare," or "if I have a bad dream," I don't think that speech would have had the cut through that it did. And the third one is that there are many different types of hope. So there is a hope where you hope that your sport team might win on a weekend. That's kind of a flimsy hope. There's a hope that often gets used by politicians, which can be a bit misleading. They'll come out before an election and promise you this and promise you that. It's kind of a manipulative hope. But the hope that I really get excited about is more of a grounded hope. It's a muscular hope. And it's based on seeing people doing amazing, inspiring things that changes your frame of mind or your perspective on something. And you see that it's real and tangible and that they're making a difference, and that actually lights you up and makes you feel very different about a subject. And that's what happened with me. Starting to research for this film, I spoke to hundreds of different scientists and academics around the world. I started looking for the hopeful solutions, and I couldn't believe how many things were out there. And I was shocked at how my own disposition changed, that I suddenly felt more engaged. I could read a full article. My window of tolerance was a lot wider because I was more excited by the things I was reading. And I just thought that there's a really good opportunity to tell a different story, especially around our environment. All we hear is how bad things are. If you think of most Hollywood films that display our future, it's usually pretty dystopian. We're humans getting chased by robots. We're living in slums. There's no nature anywhere. These are the images that we're putting into our subconscious. These are the images we're drip feeding into our children, into the collective mind about what our future might be. So now more than ever, it is really crucial to start bringing in those hopeful stories and to start showing a different vision of what that future might look like. And that's a real call to all artists, to storytellers, filmmakers, poets, creatives, writers, even kids that like to draw. One of my favorite quotes is by a guy named Terence McKenna, and he said that the role of the artist is to save the soul of mankind, and anything else is a dithering while Rome burns. If the artist can't find the way, then the way can't be found. So this is our moment, especially now as the entire system hits the pause button and we don't know what's going to happen next. This is the time to share ideas, to share visions, to start getting creative. So what I'm going to do now is just show you some of the most inspiring solutions and stories that I've found from traveling around the world. I went to about 14 different countries to put this film together. It's a letter to my daughter, a visual letter, showing her what the world could look like in 2040 if we put these solutions into practice now. So it's a combination of hope, but also using imagination, of really trying to excite people, not push them into fear and say that if we make changes, you're going to lose things, we're going to be deprived of things we love. We say, no, if we actually take these actions, we can create a better world for all of us. We can strengthen our communities, we can be healthier, and we can live far better lives that are less scatty and busy and hectic. We're using less resources and we're more connected, which I think deep down is what we all want. So I'll start by showing you a video first of where we're at right now as a planet. I think it's really important for me just to explain that really quickly. You'll see here this beautiful shot of our planet. So this is our spaceship, which is hurtling through the galaxy at about 100,000 kilometers an hour right now. It is a spaceship moving through space. And the reason that we're all able to sit here and talk and have this meeting is because of something called the carbon cycle. And what that means is that carbon is found in 5 major points around our planet. It's found in the soil, it's found in the trees and the animals like us. There's carbon in the oceans, in the atmosphere, and there's some carbon buried underground as fossil fuels. And as we know, over the last probably 150 years, we've broken the balance of that carbon cycle. And we've taken a lot of that carbon that's buried underground and we've put it into our delicate atmosphere. And you can see the line on the horizon there of the atmosphere. You can see how thin it is. It's actually thinner than the skin of an apple by comparison. And we've been putting about 25 billion tons of carbon into that every year through burning and creating energy through driving our cars. So what we need to do is firstly stop putting that carbon into the atmosphere, start switching to things like renewable energy, so we're not polluting the atmosphere. But at the same time, we need to pull that carbon out of the atmosphere that we've already put in there, because that's a big part of the problem that people don't understand, is that we've already put it in there, so we've got to get it out. So what I did was try to find a combination of solutions that would stop putting it up and bring it down at the same time. And it was quite incredible to see how many things are out there, again, that we just don't hear about in the mainstream news, but there's lots of solutions in this space. So one of the most exciting solutions I found was actually in Bangladesh. I went to Bangladesh first, and Bangladesh had a huge amount of solar panels. In fact, until about 2 years ago, they had even more solar panels than Australia did. They had about 5.5 million panels on homes. And a lot of those homes also have a battery. But what they've done now is added this special box to their home, which allows them to buy and sell energy between the homes. And that's very different to what we do in Australia right now. We have very centralized energy, which means we have big coal-fired power stations, and they are found in one location, and we have lines that come out from there, and they power all our homes. But that can make us very vulnerable, because if that shuts down or a big storm happens or a climate change event, we can lose a lot of power very quickly. So this new model enables us to decentralize our energy, so it makes us more resilient. So I'll show you this clip, which comes from this Bangladesh village.
The setup is quite simple. Any home that has solar panels and a battery can buy this special box, which connects them to another house with the same setup. The box allows the buying or selling of energy between the homes. But it gets better.
There is still a segment of the population that still can't afford to buy a solar home system. So instead of doing that, if they can just buy a small soul box, they can just buy energy when they need it. You fill up your soul box with money. As you keep using energy, it deducts money.
What this means is that all the boxes can connect to each other to form a microgrid. It's like a water tank of community energy that people can give to or take from. The beauty is that this microgrid can then connect to the adjacent village's microgrid, and the network becomes stronger and stronger.
There's a mimicking of nature here, isn't there? Like in the way that cells multiply and form something and strengthen. Yeah,
That's a great analogy. You have one solar home system, you interconnect with your neighbors, you make it 50. Slowly you interconnect villages. Once you've collected 100 villages, you can hook it up to the grid. You can sell to the grid. Forget buying from it. You become the primary energy generation source for the country. So the idea is we are like a swarm of bees or a swarm of fish that move together, pool in all our energies together to run bigger loads.
Right. So what's really good about that solution is, as you can see, as I mentioned before, I mean, Bangladesh is a very vulnerable country to climate change. So if they get a half a metre of sea level rise, will wipe out 40% of their country because it's so low lying. And they get about 4 or 5 natural disasters every year there, which often shuts down their main grid. And even if you're connected to the grid, between 8 and 11 every night, it always shuts down. So think about that time when you spend with your families or you're doing your homework. People in Bangladesh don't get that time. They're living in darkness or off kerosene lamps, which can do a lot of damage to their lungs and all sorts of air quality. So this creates that resilience that if there is a storm, they still have energy because they're all protected individually. It decentralizes it. And also what it means is that instead of people like we do now, we pay our money to big energy companies and the money leaves our communities, the money gets to stay in their community. So it stays there and people can use it for food and all sorts of other things. And it's not making other people rich a long way from them. It's making sure that that money is equitable and equally shared within their community. So it's a huge advantage. Now, the good thing is, up until recently, this technology has been illegal in Australia and America and the UK because often big companies are protected by regulations, but that's starting to shift very quickly. And Australia is doing a lot of experiments with this type of technology. And South Australia is probably leading the way. They've just launched a virtual battery, which is they're going to give 40,000 homes that same setup with a battery and solar panels. And then those people can share their energy with each other, which also helps the grid if it needs that help, and it makes it a lot cheaper for them and their emissions come down. So we're going to see this talked about a lot more in the next 5 years. IKEA is already selling a solar panel and a battery combination. But the next 4 or 5 years, you'll be able to go to IKEA and buy that little box as well, and we'll start to be able to share our energy with each other, which is going to be really transformative. So that's one way that we can stop putting more pollution up there. We need to switch to renewable energy. And it's not just solar, there's wind, there's biodigesters which use food, and other waste materials, there's wind, there's also wave technology, all sorts of hydro, different setups are starting to emerge. But the other area we need to address is cars, our transport. At the moment, we're on track to have an extra 1 billion cars by 2040 on our roads. So just imagine what a nightmare that would be for congestion and traffic, but also just for our pollution. And even if all of those cars were electric, we don't have the resources to actually give everyone 1 billion cars, even if they're all electric, which would be better for the planet. So it's really important that we have to find a way to use less cars in our city, which can be a bit of a challenge. So a lot of experts I spoke to said that we are going to start using less cars, and it's going to happen because of a convergence of 3 technologies that all come together at the same time. Now, this has happened before in history. A lot of you probably won't remember, but there was a company called Kodak, which used to make films for cameras. Just in 1999, they were one of the biggest companies in the world. And just a few years later, they were completely bankrupt. And the reason they went bankrupt is because a convergence of technologies happened, which was the mobile phone, which had a camera in it, and then the apps started to appear where you could share photos. So no one wanted to take photos on film anymore. So their whole industry collapsed very, very quickly. And a lot of experts think this might happen in the car space. They think that the first thing that's going to happen is that these cars will switch to electric. simply because the electric car has about 21 moving parts in it, whereas a combustion normal petrol car has about 2,500 moving parts. So it's a lot less. That means also they're a lot cheaper to run. So instead of paying for petrol, electric cars, you can just plug in off into your solar panels at home. We've got one here, a second-hand car, and we don't ever have to pay for it because we just use the sun when the sun's out and it charges our car. So it's a lot cheaper. The second is the rise of rideshare apps like Uber and Lyft in America. That there are really interesting stats now saying that about half of all 16-year-olds got their license in the late 1980s, and it's now only a quarter. So a lot of 16-year-olds are just saying, do I need to own a car when I can get a ride share? Do I want to pay insurance and registration, all the petrol costs? It's very expensive to own a car, whereas if I can get subscription, that's going to be a lot cheaper. And then the third one is the driverless car element, which is going to be a big change, because once you take the driver cost out of that ride share, suddenly the price becomes even cheaper to get transport. And a lot of experts are saying that we will subscribe to transport networks. So in the same way we have Netflix and Spotify now, we don't actually own DVDs or CDs. A lot of us in the future, especially in inner cities, will subscribe to driverless car networks that will just move around our cities, and we'll be able to get on and off a car really, really cheaply. So the video I'm going to show you now is the first time I ever got into a driverless car. This was in Singapore. It was a little bit challenging, but it will just explain some of the technology and give you more understanding.
In the US right now, road vehicles contribute to 20% of emissions. But our environment and sanity will be severely tested, with predictions of an extra 1 billion cars worldwide by 2040.
Here in my car, I feel safest of all. I can lock all my doors.
A possible solution could be replacing car ownership with on-demand driverless vehicles.
The same way that we went from owning DVDs or CDs or records or whatever to having all of those on demand, essentially Netflix and so on, the same thing is going to happen with transportation.
I wasn't sure I'd trust a driverless car with my daughter, so I subjected this prototype to the surprise pedestrian test.
Ah, yes! Robots 1, human 0.
The next test was a little more challenging. Traffic.
When I push this button, this car will be driving itself. And wish me luck. Right. So this is my first experience in a driverless vehicle, and I'm a little bit nervous because that wheel's turning by itself. Siri, please look after me. So yeah, you can see that's our car tracking there, and the little LiDAR, the radar on top, is reading out all the information, I think about 50 meters ahead of us, and scanning the area and determining what's around us, what other obstacles, what it should look out for, pedestrians, bike riders, other cars. So it's constantly ahead of us, predicting.
Two things are going to happen. We're all going to have a massive fleet of cars that are going to pick you up at home, take you to work, take you to the supermarket, and so on. And the other one, even if you already own a car that you already paid off, it's going to be 4 times more expensive just to own that car than it is to access transportation as a service, so autonomous electric vehicles.
I do like the freedom of my own car. So the big question is, are enough of us willing to give that up and embrace shared transportation?
So the reason I put that in the film was because this was probably the toughest solution to find. How do we reduce the cars in our cities? And the reason I put it in there was because what it presents us is with an opportunity to actually redesign our cities for humans instead of cars for the first time. Because if a lot of us are going to be subscribing to driverless car networks and not actually owning a car ourselves, it frees up a lot of space in the city. So all that parking along the roads, all the car parking stations that we use now, a lot of those will become redundant because no one will be driving into the city and parking their car. It sits there for 96% of the time. It's a stranded asset. Why would you just leave it there if it was really cheap to get a driverless car? So this is where the imagination element of the film was really important and really why I made the film. I think it's important to not just say to people, you know, we've got to get less cars on the road. You know, they're polluting the atmosphere. People are going to shut off from that. But if you show them a vision of what these cities could look like with less cars, suddenly it becomes more exciting. It's a different conversation. It kickstarts a discussion point for people. Even if they disagree with some of these things, at least we're starting to talk about it. We're starting to shape the future we want instead of it being dictated to us by other companies or organisations or governments. We get a say in the vision that we collectively want for our communities. So this video I'm going to show you right now just explores what we could do with all that freed up parking space if we had less cars in our cities.
Inevitably, there'll be debates around this technology. But if enough of us embrace ride sharing, we could reclaim our cities for humans instead of vehicles and generate millions of new jobs.
This is big vision. We just need to have that vision now. A lot of people want to be working on something that they can see is actually helping to regenerate and innovatively recreate the world.
The extra space in our cities could allow the building of more low-cost, sustainable homes. And we could see the growth of remanufacturing industries, which might convert existing vehicles to electric. But most exciting could be the urban food farms that spring up in empty parking lots or inside disused car parks. And imagine having fresh local food growing on our rooftops. This would also contribute to a much healthier environment.
It's unbeatable to grow food in your own backyard. It's unbeatable to grow food all through and around your city. It's unbeatable to grow food on your roof. Those are the absolute gold standard of emissions.
So yeah, you can see there how important it is to imagine what life could look like on the other side of this crisis. And that, I think that's been a huge problem with talking about climate change and other environmental issues. It's been a failure of imagination as much as anything else. That if we want to bring people in, we've got to get them excited about the new world that they could live in or the world that they'd be leaving for their children. It's not enough just to say, stop doing that. It's not good for the planet. We've actually got to also bring in this solutions narrative and get people excited. So if we implemented those two things, the renewable energy and the electric cars and less of them, we would dramatically stop putting carbon into that atmosphere. But as I talked about before, at the same time, even if we did that tomorrow, if we went to complete renewable energy tomorrow with all electric cars, we would still have decades of increased warming because of the carbon dioxide we've already put in the atmosphere over the last 150 years. So we've got to find a way of restoring that carbon balance and getting it out of the atmosphere at the same time. Now, one of the most exciting things that's coming through is something called regenerative agriculture, which is farmers now pulling carbon out of the atmosphere and putting it into their soils. And once they do that, it creates healthier foods, it creates, holds more water on their farmland. This is why people are planting trees around the world at the moment. One of the most amazing stories I heard last year, which again wasn't covered in any of the mainstream newspapers or news, was that the people of Ethiopia in just 12 hours planted 350 million trees in just 12 hours. Now that should be mainstream news. You'd think that's an extraordinary human achievement. But again, the hope lies in the shadows, away from the main spotlight. That's where the magic's happening. But the other way we can pull that carbon out of the atmosphere is actually through seaweed, believe it or not. Most of us think of seaweed as just a bit of a nuisance that gets in the way when we're at the beach. But some of the seaweeds are the fastest growing organisms in the world. They can grow 0.5 meter a day, and the brown seaweeds can grow up to 50 meters long. So what a lot of scientists are exploring now is planting these giant seaweed forests out at sea, which are just like forests on land. They create a habitat for all sorts of fish and different animals. They clean up the water, but at the same time, they're pulling carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere. So the video I'm going to show you now is a video we did because we showed this solution in the film, and then we set up a crowdfund off the back of the film to get people to help us build the first seaweed platform in Australia. So that's this video now.
Until recently, large seaweed forests ran along many of the world's coastlines. They provided habitats for marine life, local food and jobs, and made for terrific fake beards. But with most of the heat from global warming going into our oceans, much of this seaweed has been wiped out, including 95% of kelp along the east coast of Tasmania. But there is a solution. Scientists have discovered a way to regenerate the seaweeds. They pump cooler, nutrient-rich water from the deep ocean and disperse it over a seaweed-growing platform near the surface.
Seaweeds actually draw down carbon dioxide from the ocean waters, and they restore the alkalinity of the ocean that enables shellfish and other creatures to thrive.
Apart from restoring ecosystems, seaweed could also play a crucial role in reversing global warming.
Well, this is an example of brown seaweed. The fastest brown seaweeds will grow a half a meter per day.
Hang on. Half a metre a day?
Half a meter a day, and they'll grow over 50 meters long.
Is that one of the fastest growing plants in the world?
It is the fastest growing tree on the planet.
Wow, okay. So that's why the understanding that it's going to be pulling carbon out of the atmosphere very quickly,
Yes.
because it grows so fast.
Thousands of tons of carbon per square kilometre per year.
But this humble weed has even more to offer. Seaweed is good for food, fertiliser, biofuels, plastics, healthy omega-3s, fibres for clothes, nutraceuticals, for feeding to cattle to lower their methane, and of course, fake beards. 2040 is collaborating with the Climate Foundation, the University of Tasmania and the Intrepid Foundation to launch Australia's first seaweed platform in Storm Bay near Hobart. But we need your help. For every dollar you donate today, the Intrepid Foundation will match that dollar. So together, we have an opportunity to make Australia a world leader in this exciting climate solution. So donate now and help the regeneration.
So what's terrific about that particular video is that it was a real test for us in terms of, does hope work as a motivator? Does it actually inspire people into action? And in about 4 or 5 months of having that campaign out, we raised over $700,000 just from people giving $10 or $15 or $30. And we are now starting to build that platform down in Tasmania with the University of Tasmania. We've been down there, the seaweed is in the water, it's begun. Now, that wouldn't have happened, I don't think, if we'd made a film about how dead the oceans are and we need help, and what are we going to do about it? People's window of tolerance, they were full. So by using that inspiring story, that motivation, it's brought more people on, they've been more excited about it and really want to learn more. And now we're looking at building other platforms around the world by showing the solution. So again, it's really clear evidence that hope is so powerful as a way to motivate people. And I think even right now, what we're dealing with around the world, there's so much trauma and anxiety and fear going on for a lot of people around coronavirus. But what we're also seeing is this extraordinary acts of humanity and goodwill that are coming out. And they're the hope for me. That's where I get reminded that we are actually a very altruistic race. And we've created a system that's often based on competition and rivalry. But the minute that system hits pause and stops, there's another part of us that comes out, a different part of our essence. And there's incredible stories coming from around the world of like this group of mothers that's set up this jogging group to stay fit. And they go and pick up medication from a chemist and they deliver it to the elderly's home who can't leave their home. So they're using that as a service and a way to get fit. There's an 8-year-old in America, for example, who's set up a virtual play date where kids right around the world can get online and meet kids from different countries they've never met before to interact and make sure they feel like there's a sense of community even though they're inside. There's a great story out of Dublin where There's this balcony bingo that started where people come out onto their balconies, and someone sits in the middle of the courtyard with a big megaphone, and they're all playing bingo as a community. People that have never met before, just suddenly interacting and coming together because of this moment. And then even in China, when the public transport went down in the lockdown, this group of drivers got together and set up an app that was a community fleet so they could drive all the nurses and doctors to the hospitals. That's why they did it. So this gives me hope. This is where the hope lies. In these moments, you can really see the best of people coming out. And that's really what I want to leave you today, is that we all have a responsibility these days. We all are publishers in our way. We all have access to social media. We share things. And if you think about the internet, it's almost like a collective consciousness. It's a group mind that we have. So I'd ask you to really think about the things that you're sharing. Are you sharing more misinformation or fear? Or are you putting out stories of hope and stories of solution that inspire people and show what things can be done? This is the time for us to really think about what we are sharing and take responsibility for that. And I'd also encourage you right now in this downtime, these moments to reflect, to make sure you dream and use your imagination, to just sit down one day, get out a piece of paper and actually draw the world you might want to live in. Think about it. Really imagine what it would be like to walk around that world. What does it look like? Is there more greenery on the buildings? Are there hoverboards? Are there drones flying around? What would you like to see? Because the future, the actions that we take today will build that future we want. And that process only begins when we start dreaming it and imagining it. And that's what we've got to do right now. So imagine it and then start talking about it. So thanks for listening. I think Asterix is going to have some questions now, and I'm happy to stay online for a little bit longer and answer any questions that you might have that came up during that talk.
Damon, that was fantastic. Thank you so much. It was a real honor to be able to have you joining us today. And I got lost. There's so much that's in your brain. How are you handling all of that information in your brain?
I don't know, Asterix. I can't explain that. And sometimes I get lost myself. But I do my best to try and make sure it's clear. So I hope some of that was clear. And if it wasn't clear, I'm happy to simplify it or explain it in a different way. Anyone that has a question that they didn't quite understand.
Oh, I found it so inspiring. I love the seaweed piece, just blows me away as to how fast it grows and how positive that is. And I wonder, maybe at AIM we could do something with you guys around seaweed to help raise some funds for it. Maybe we could create a seaweed hoodie maybe, or do something that helps raise funds for that project.
That sounds great. Or if you could talk to some of your puppet community about, the ways they could get involved, and we could get the puppets on board the seaweed message.
Yes, we'll definitely pull together a puppet theme song for you. We could do that. Actually, one of my friends is called Hope. She helps host Wednesday's show on IMAGI-NATION TV. We've got some comments from the YouTube chat line.
Yep.
Damon, what would your reasonable recommendation be to all of us? Actions to take now to redesign our lives, transport, diet, affiliations, households, businesses, energy consumptions, options, etc. That's from Brendan Newton. Quite a thorough question.
It's a very small question. Okay, so what I'll say is I think the problem we've got so far is that we've been very prescriptive with people about what to do. We've said, eat less meat, ride your bike to work, change your light globes, and that doesn't necessarily resonate with everyone. So I would encourage anyone that's wanting to get involved, if you go to our website, whatsyour2040.com, whatsyour2040.com, there's a button there that says activate your plan. And once you push that button, we ask you some questions about the type of person you are, what your passions are, what you resonate with, how much time you have available. And then based on those answers, we'll give you 6 or 7 things that you can do right now. Because the research says that if we give you things that are more aligned to your values and passions, you're more likely to see them through. So there's lots of options there. We've teamed up with over 50 different organisations from around the world. You can donate to seaweed. You can mentor girls online. You can help farmers out. You can help decentralize energy. If you're a teacher, there's about 31 free lesson plans that you can download, which we've had 17,000 teachers download. So there's a suite of options to help you get involved, rather than me just tell everyone the thing they should do.
Whatsyour2040.com. We'll throw it in the comments as well so everyone can get there. Thank you so much for creating such a tool. You're really going above and beyond to make it as easy as possible for people to act. I have a couple of questions here. We have one from Boo Love Music. Do you have any idea how we are dealing with our battery disposal and how close we are to finding bio-safe batteries?
Very good question. So there is emerging recyclable batteries. So the lithium-ion batteries we use now, about 90% of that battery can be recycled, which is a great story. And of all the batteries, the lithium-ion battery is probably the least toxic. So that's also a good story. But there are lots of really interesting innovations coming through. I know in South Australia, there's a group that use silicon. They heat up the silicon to store energy. There's people using salt as well. So we're going to see lots more innovation in the next few years coming ahead. It won't just be that one battery. Cars are even experimenting with hydrogen cells as well. So there's lots of people moving very quickly on this. Again, lurking in the shadows. There's lots of good stuff happening.
Todd Smith has a question, and he's wondering if he could contact anyone in the UK who's working on a seaweed project. Do you know anyone in the UK who's working on that?
Good question, Todd. So we are about to launch a project off the coast of Devon in the UK. If you go to our website, whatsyour2040.com, in the top left, there's a button that says contact us. If you write to there, we've got a team that will get back to you pretty quickly, and they can share some of that information about the scientist who's working on that in Devon in the UK, because that's another very exciting project.
And Todd also mentioned he's a scuba diver, so perhaps we can get him wearing the seaweed hoodie and the puppets dancing as he goes in to help plant the first seaweed outside of Devon.
That's right. Well, what's very exciting about the scuba divers is that if you go down to Tasmania where the giant kelp forest used to be, lots of stories talk about the divers that used to go through those seaweed forests that were like swimming through forests, and they'd swim with all sorts of different fish and seals and whatnot. So it's a beautiful tourism idea to get people scuba diving amongst the seaweed forests again.
Hey, speaking of Devon, did you ever eat Devon and tomato sauce sandwiches?
Well, we called it Fritz. I was in South Australia, and it was called a Fritz sandwich. And I just don't listen when someone calls it Devon. But yes, it was a strange substance that I can't quite explain the taste of.
Me either. Still don't know what it is. Hey, I've got one other question. Sorry, I cut you off. Please forgive me. I was wondering, how do you get the confidence to do what you're doing?
Wow, I've never been asked that. I don't feel it's a confidence issue. I just feel that I've got two daughters. I feel that it's just needs to be done. To me, it feels it's the truth, and there's too much at stake, and it's our planet, and it's our home, and it's everything we've got. And sometimes we get distracted by so many other things, but we need to be reminded that this is the most important thing. If we don't get this right, nothing else matters. So I just feel compelled to share and talk about it and try and help with it, because it feels like it's the most important issue that I'll ever face in my lifetime.
Well, thank you for rising up and for using your confidence and everything you've got to tell these stories. It is the artists that help us go forward, and you have been a fantastic artist in telling this story. The AIM family loves you. Imagination TV loves you. The YouTube chat line loves you. If you've got a minute to jump on the chat line, I'm sure people would love to say hello and ask a couple of questions. But from our end, we just wanted to say thank you for joining us for Cancelled Not Cancelled. Thank you to Grounded Festival for partnering with us for this special episode. And please keep going. Please keep using your confidence and your voice. You're inspiring us all. Thank you, Damon. Thank you.
Thank you, Asterix. You're the nicest papa I've met.
You should meet some of my friends. They're very polite. Now, thank you everybody for joining us on Imagination TV. Tomorrow we'll have the artist segment. Wow, last week was a special one with Ben Lee coming in live, and we had great creations happening at the same time. We have a special crew joining us tomorrow. Shelley Morris has recorded a special song, Just on Hope, just for all of you. If you want to support Imagination TV, head to aimmentoring.com so we can help get a mentor into every kid's life, 1.37 billion and counting. Let's come together in these times, as Damon said. Let's take hope from the shadows and let's bring it out front and center. Let's share this television show out there so kids can have that hope and guidance, and we'll keep bringing mentors into the home every single day. Grab an Imagination hoodie at aimmentoring.com or give us a small donation to keep going. Thank you, everybody. Look after each other. Lots of love. Take care, and we'll see you soon. That's it from me. I'm Asterix.